is another example of a guy that was coming to see us play a lot. And he was friends with Bob Weir. And he said, would you like to meet Bob? And I was like, yeah. Because I came to the Grateful Dead late. My wife, when I first met her, she had followed the Dead a bit when she was in college. And I was aware. I had heard the radio songs. I had never owned a Dead record. And she was playing one of the Dick's Picks. It's from the Fox Theater in Atlanta in 1977. We were like cooking hamburgers on the deck or something. And I fell in love. I was like, well, with her and with this album. But I'm like, what is this again? You know, and I get the CD, I'm looking at it, and I fell just hopelessly in love with their music. And then American Beauty, and then Working Man's Dead, and then more live stuff. But then Europe 72 was like, oh, I like this the best. Because it's kind of funky, and it lived in the same place that the band kind of did, you know. Had that kind of, you know, that halftime up on Cripple Creek kind of feel. Tennessee Jed's got that. And that I was like, this shit speaks to me, you know. More than like the like experimental acid trip kind of, let's see how much noise we can make. That's not really never been really my thing. Songs, I like songs. Anyway, so this guy was like, would you like to meet Bob? We say, yeah. So we were going out to play around San Francisco, and they worked it out to where at that point, this was before Dead and Company or any of that. Bob was, I think he was only doing the occasional Rat Dog show, if at all. But he was jamming with his buddies a lot at TRI Studios, which he opened out there with Bill Kreutzmann's son, Justin. And they would have people come over and jam, and they would film it and stream it. And so they worked it all out, and he's like, Bob would like to do it with you guys. And we were like, yeah, this would be great. So I wasn't even sure if he would want to do Dead songs then, because I don't think much of that was going on for him at the time. Maybe, I'm not sure. I wasn't really aware of what he was doing at that moment, but he's like, of course. So I picked out, he let me pick them. And then we got there, he's like, the plan was we would do an hour with Bob and then an hour just our band. And we had a new album coming out, so we were going to do a bunch of those. But it couldn't be loud. It was in a quiet little, you know, controlled studio environment, mostly acoustic in the beginning. And then he's like, let's play electric, you know. But the songs I picked, he added a few. He's like, could we do Big River? I said, yeah. Then he said, could we do Willin' by Little Feat? I said, absolutely. And Up on Cripple Creek by the band. He picked those. And it was a great day. He came, it was 2 days really. He came in the second day, and then he had to take his daughter to see Taylor Swift. And he's like, I don't really have any idea who this is, but my daughter loves her. And that was in 2000, probably 13, yeah, I think right around there. So it didn't see the light of day for years. And we had a blast. He told stories. We were talking about music they loved. And he told me, he's like, he wanted to do Yesterday's Wine, which we wound up not doing. But he said, George Jones is my favorite musician. And I was like, really? He goes, aside from Jerry Garcia, George Jones is my favorite musician. And he said, the way that you feel about Jerry, that's how I feel about George. And it makes sense, because he would do the Races On, you know. And
I wonder if George ever played with the Dead.
I doubt it.
Wouldn't that have been something?
I bet he would have been extremely confused. But Bob told me also, he said, I told him I had played with a steel player who had seen Buck Owens and the Buckaroos live in the 60s with Buck and Don Rich, and how loud they were, because they played Fender Twin amps, just dimed, tellies. And he said, I saw it too. He said, Jerry and I went to see him, and he named the theater. I don't know if it was the Warfield. I don't know if that existed in the 60s maybe, but it was in the Bay Area. He said, we went and saw him, and he said, they took us to school. And he said, we because they were in like a jug band at the time, maybe 2 different jug bands. The Dead didn't exist yet, but they knew each other. I think Jerry was giving Bob guitar lessons, maybe at the time. But he said they were like the country Beatles, which they were aware of, obviously, and they weren't supposed to like. But he said we loved them because of their vocal harmonies. But he said, the power of the Buckaroos was not lost on them. They were like, oh shit, we got to be that good, you know?
When you're playing with Bob Weir, like part of his thing is him comping chords and making interesting spaces for Garcia to improvise over. Was it hard to keep space there for him?
No.
What goes into that in your head when you're playing there?
His guitar playing is such a huge part of the Dead. And if I didn't know that before we played with him, that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, what you just said, you know, all those different chord shapes, and
he's got a thing.
He's got a thing, that very rhythmic chugging thing that he does. It was extremely powerful in our jam. I'm like, I don't need to do anything. I mean, it's Bob Weir's, he is moving this train. Even Britt, our drummer, was like, I'm following what he's doing. He's like, it was so cool to hear that in my right ear, you know, like, okay, that's our percussionist for a while, Preston Holcomb, he really loved the Jerry Garcia band. I do too, but I'm like, I like the Dead more because of Bob. When Bob's not there, it bumps me out, you know. But he was great. He had gotten into that. He likes to play slow, you know. He's like, I remember thinking, we did Promised Land. He would always sing that, you know, with the Dead. And I was like, you want to start it? And he's like, you start it. So I was like, okay. Excuse me. So I'm like, no. He goes, whoa. Slow down. So I was like, no, slow down. It was like that Andy Griffith episode. Quiet. And I literally was like, like I can't physically play this any slower. And he's like, yes, perfect. But it was great. So years later, I was emailing with Justin Kreutzmann, who's a filmmaker and super talented dude, and grew up in the Dead. You know, his dad's Bill Kreutzmann. He was going through some of that footage, and he's like, "This stuff is really good, man. I think there are people that would really like it because it only happened that one night, the stream, you know, and it wasn't available again." And so we were like, I think our fans will dig it, you know. And so we got together and mixed the audio, and he edited the video and put it together, and we started selling it. And it was just and right after that is when they did like the Fare Thee Well with Trey from Fish. So it was like the Putting It Away Forever. And then they immediately made the announcement, but now we're going to do it with O'Teal and John Mayer, and it's called Dead and Company. So, we had nothing to do with that, but we caught him in a window where he wasn't busy, is my point.
I went down a rabbit hole a couple years ago, and I mean this with all respect and love to the Dead, of the incident that happened in Indianapolis back in the 90s where at Deer Creek Amphitheater where some fans rushed the fence. And I learned so much about the cultural phenomenon that was the Dead right then that I feel like most of the world completely ignored. Mm-hmm. But there were 200,000 people showed up to a random Dead gig that were there on site, you know, where probably 20,000 could get in with tickets or whatever. And there were people following them around like this, and the media and the country at large were completely ignoring it.
Unaware, yeah.
It's like Springsteen, Born in the USA, or Michael Jackson, Thriller, level big,
yeah.
And it was completely ignored. That's an amazing cultural phenomenon that they were.
My wife, I was clueless also, you know. I knew that Jerry Garcia was just this deified musician, you know. It just was, I hadn't gone there yet until I met her. And then I really dug in and was like, this man was, and not just I mean, the whole band, but specifically him. I'm like, he is an American music original. Like, he literally is an original voice, an original creator of this hodgepodge of American music, you know? And then he died, and it just was like an amazing loss. But she told me about like all the different factions, like the Spinners and the Sober People, who are the wharf rats, you know. This whole, like, all these little microcosms of Dead fans that, like, 200,000 people full of all these little cliques. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, and then just the merchandise and the taping and just a phenomenon. But then you think about it, because, I mean, I remember first learning about the Wall of Sound and how they had Dan Healy and Owsley Stanley, Bear. And so all these people that were involved, I guess, in putting that all together. And the idea was a line array. If you really stand back far enough to see the idea now, it's like they wanted, you know, you got the line arrays now that are like this, and they're small boxes, and coverage is what they were looking for. They wanted there to not be a bad sounding seat in the venue or the experience or the field or whatever. And so they wound up taking that monstrosity of tens of thousands of pounds of speakers and equipment just to make people have a good listening experience at their show, a better listening experience. Like, that's nuts.
Yeah.
I keep seeing over the years parts of that system that are for sale. Some speaker cabinet. I'd love to have a piece of it. They were called Hard Trucker cabinets, I think, maybe. Maybe that was the company. I have a good photographer friend, John Gelman. He's in Asheville, North Carolina. He took pictures of a bunch of those shows. He has pictures of Dickie Betts sitting in with the brothers in '73. And I said, what was the Wall of Sound like? And he said, omnipresent. I said, loud? And he goes, it wasn't about being loud. It was, you could not escape it. But he said it sounded excellent. They accomplished what they were trying to achieve. It was perfect.
It had to have been a pain in the ass to haul around.
It looked like a skyscraper. And they took it to Europe. They put it on boats, I guess. Insane. They were not in it to make money. Just wanted to sound good.
I've thought that I was not in it.
I'm not either, yeah.
There's no proof that I'm in it to make money.